Hey everybody, it's Richard Harris and Scott Leese with another exciting episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. Once again, brought to you by our friends over at Gong, over at Lead 411 to give you direct dial phone numbers. Our new friends at Find 'em who can help you identify what an A player means for you and exactly who they are, even when they're in a passive job search from a recruiting perspective. And then also our friends at Perception Predict, which helps you identify exactly how much your reps are going to produce in terms of hitting their goal or missing it and by how much. So thanks to all of our sponsors. And I want to introduce JoBeth Hanak or Hanak, depending on which side of the family she's with, right? Thanksgiving must be
Yes.
fun. If that's the biggest debate you have with your family, then I think you're better than most of us right now.
Oh, it's definitely the smallest debate for sure.
So,
But
just
it's funny. I used to say Hanak actually, and then a few months ago, I wanted to get back to my Texan roots, and so I decided to switch over to saying Hanak. So I switched sides.
So JoBeth's in Austin, Texas. She's a BDR Zilliant. But equally important, if not a little bit more, is that she is a co-founder of Sassy Women in Sales, which I know we're going to talk about because it's certainly an underserved community in terms of sales and career development. But JoBeth, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so just from a context perspective, right? Um, how did you even get into sales? Because I know you have a slightly different background than a lot of people, although there never is really one background for sales. But how did you even get into it?
For sure. So back whenever I was in college, I was working for an acrobatic yoga company. And part of my job for that was to talk to people about signing up for their classes. And I realized that I just really enjoyed talking to people, much more than I enjoyed like all the other work I was doing for that business. And whenever that job ended, I wanted to get into sales. And so I, I hit up my gym because I was really into fitness at the time and asked if they had any positions open, and they said, well, you could sell gym memberships for us. So, and if anyone, if you've known anyone who's sold gym memberships, it's an absolute grind. It's not, it's definitely interesting, but that was my first go at, talking to people for a living, and I absolutely loved it. I had worked an internship like another summer where I was in front of a computer typing stuff all the time. And, that job that was like 20 hours a week, on top of my other work, of course, it felt like 80 hours. And, whenever I, started selling gym memberships and just talking to people, I realized I was like, well, I'm good at this. And they ended up moving me into personal training and paying for my certification and everything. And I just really took off. I was number one at my gym my first year. And that was while in school too. And so it was definitely, I learned that I just had a knack for it. It was just like taking, I don't want to use the phrase fish to water. That's so
So
lame,
what do you,
but yeah,
and I'm sure
go
there's
ahead.
definitions to it, but how hard is it to sell a gym membership? And
Oh, so hard.
and maybe a better question is, what are you really focusing on when you're selling a gym membership?
Oh, I haven't thought about it in so long, but definitely like trying to dig into someone's goals, what they're looking for. Most people are kind of searching around between gyms, so maybe they have their heart set on another one. You'd have a lot of people who just kind of wanted like the free 3-day pass, because that's kind of what we would do, like to sell the gym membership. You'd have the 3-day pass, and then from there you'd be like, let's join, please. And so it was definitely, you would get some people who it just took a little bit of nudge. It was just talking to them about their goals, why they wanted to join. Yeah, pretty much that.
So basically, it's a decently qualified inbound lead, and you're having to talk to them about their goals.
Their goals and, making them feel comfortable in the gym. That was one of the things that I was pretty good at, because I didn't have a traditional fitness background either. I didn't play sports, like quite the opposite. I was like an art nerd, who would like, I didn't even go to lunch in the cafeteria. I'd be like hiding in the closet in the art room, like making art, And so like, that was my background. So I connected really well with the people who are coming in who, maybe were in their 20s or in their 30s, wanting to work out for the first time. And, I could really make them feel comfortable and like they could join 24-hour fitness. So
you went from gym membership sales, like right into the frying pan of high velocity transactional sales as an
Well,
end-to-end
personal training first.
salesperson at Signpost, right?
Yes, I worked at Signpost. And actually, I only sold gym memberships for about 9 months. And then from there, I went into personal training for almost 2 years.
Mm.
So from personal training, then and what happened, honestly, and I'm pretty open about this, was I had an eating disorder. That was a huge part of, my career as a personal trainer was, I was very sick. I had like a form of anorexia called orthorexia, where I was obsessed with health and fitness. And so whenever I finally got help for that, I kind of found that like I was no longer in like a really healthy environment, and I needed out like pretty quickly. And I needed a new career. And I just happened to have some friends who, they worked in this field, and, one of them had worked at Signpost and kind of gave me a referral and got me to help me get the job.
Yeah. I mean, that was end-to-end sales, right?
What does that mean?
Like full cycle.
Full cycle. Yeah. I started off just, they'd put us on the phones the first week kind of thing.
What I like so much about your sales career is you did some of the hardest types of sales right from the beginning, and kind of went through Navy SEALs boot camp, if you will. Right?
That's exactly how I've seen it, going through full cycle, short sales cycle, just high energy sales environment. It was definitely a boot camp, to say the least.
Yeah. Now, yeah. I want to touch on what you talked about in terms of, your health, and both physical as well as mental health. What are the things that you are doing to protect your mental and physical health as a salesperson right now, as a business owner right now, going through super stressful times? I mean, we're all kind of doing this, but I think those of us who've had significant health problems, mental or physical, before, are impacted and affected a little bit differently. And so I wondered if you can talk to people out there who maybe have been going through something similar, and what advice you have for them, and what things have your own guardrails up for right now.
Sure. And in addition to having to recover from an eating disorder, I've also been sober for about 4.5 years. So I kind of got hit with, the eating disorder, the addiction, and then also, just the mental health stuff in general. And, especially for me, I mean, what ended up happening was I got into the industry and I did really well at first. I was like doing super well. And then, it came to one point whenever I wasn't. And for me, that happened in February of, I guess that was 2019. And for me, like I was a perfectionist, I was used to being number one at my gym, and then coming into this company and being, one of the top reps, and having, a great reputation for being really consistent. And then in February, I had a 0 month. And it was one of those things where it just wrecked me as a human being. And, it was a big, like I talked to my friend who was a counselor. She was in school for counseling. And I was talking to her about how, like, I'm staying late and I'm working so hard and I just can't seem to make it work. And, she told me, and she called me out, and she was just like, you're talking about, yourself and your career, but you're making it seem like that's all there is to you. That you're taking all these statements about you and your career life, and you're making it about yourself. And, she really pointed out to me, and that was pretty much like a game-changing moment for me with my mental health and sales, was that, I have, like, this is just my career. It's a very small part of my life, because it had become like so much of my identity, like many things. And so for me, I had to, start leaving at 5. I like started signing up for spin classes at 5:30, so I had to leave at 5, and started to have other things going on in my life that I could lean on. And, I've gone through some like harder times in sales since then. And it's been so much easier than it was that time, because I know that, like, I am also an artist, and I also have friends, and, I have, things going on in my life besides just work. And, I think that's one of the things that was a little bit of a struggle even coming into quarantine, was that all of a sudden, like, a lot of those other things were gone.
Yeah.
And for me, adjusting to quarantine, my first week, I was like, dude, this is great. I'm doing so well. I'm working great from home. And, then I had a week of just deep depression, where it was like, oh my gosh, it was just paralyzing. And, what I ended up having to do was my boss was like, take a half day, cook some food, clean up your apartment, get a work to like from home place going. And, ever since, and that helped, I got out of it, but I've since had to I've gone back into counseling a little bit as of last couple weeks. Because what also ended up happening in quarantine was, I got a new awesome job, and, I got, SaaSsy up and going, and then I'm invited on this podcast and, I started to get a taste for a new level of success and started experiencing a lot of imposter syndrome. So, for me, it's just kind of been focusing on, having other things going on in my life besides just my job, and finding enjoyment there and taking care of myself and professionals, so many professionals, for sure.
I just did an episode on imposter syndrome for myself.
I listened to it.
Yeah. I hope it was okay.
It was good.
She's the one who listened to it, Richard.
So, but it means a lot. Like, we hear this word a lot, and we hear it a lot in sales. And I think it doesn't matter what department or where you are in life. We all feel it at some point. What was your imposter syndrome, or what is your imposter syndrome? Because it's different for me than I think it is for other people. For me, it's a self-esteem issue, which I've struggled with for a long time and still do. What was it like for you?
I got to a point where I was completely convinced that I needed to change everything about myself to be successful. And, it had built up over time, and I started to also just feel really I just had a lot of new things going on. I was just, figuring out how to lead a networking group with my co-founder, and figuring out, I switched from SMB sales into enterprise as a BDR role. And so I had a lot of new things going on, and just kind of felt like I was still figuring it out, but just having to just not I wasn't giving myself permission to really do that. And I got to the point too where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm 26 years old, and I have 3 nose rings, not just one, I have 3. And I was like, I have tattoos, oh my gosh, I need to just change everything. And, I just got to this point where I just started being really honest with people in my life with where I was at. And, that's been extremely helpful.
So what kind of things do you encourage yourself with when you say, I had to give myself permission? Because I think this is a huge thing. And I don't care if it's imposter syndrome or, working through your substance situation or your eating situation. What kind of things do you have to give yourself permission for?
I had to just learn that it's okay to make mistakes. I have such a hard time making mistakes. And it's just part of a human, it's part of having a career. I do it all the time. I have some funny stories there, as I'm sure we all do, but how it used to feel whenever I would make a mistake, and it still feels like this sometimes. It's just that the world is ending, and that this is the end of my career. And it's just, I can just get to a point where it's just shattering, yeah.
And then how do you dig yourself out? How do you kind of, for me, I have to slap myself on the face. A lot of times I'll call Scott. I'll be like, dude, this is how I'm feeling today, which I know is not typically manly to do, but I'm happy to admit it.
Do it. Yeah, just giving myself permission to be where I'm at and to not have to be anyone else. I can't come on here and be like, oh yeah, I have 10 years of experience in this or anything, and just kind of owning that I'm new, I'm figuring it out. Asking for help has been really huge, and also just being open with people where I'm at, not having to try to put on this facade that I know what I'm doing, because it's just so much easier. I think what I had to learn is just that it's okay to be authentic, and that I can be myself. And because I had just been convinced that everything needs to change if this is not working.
I got one more question, then I want to shift. I want to talk about SaaSsy sales.
Sure.
I have one more question around this.
Mm-hmm.
As you get perspective in life, right, as we get older, we can start to recognize habits earlier in our life of oh, maybe that's where that came from, or maybe that's where that came from. Did you notice anything as you've been going through your own recovery of things, or even to your point, the faster we grow and the more successful we get, the more scared we get, right? Any patterns you've noticed?
Definitely some fear, some like self-esteem, just a lot of anxiety, and some of it can be, like to where I can get really caught up in myself and what's going on with me. But the biggest thing would probably be the fear, and that's like a huge thing that's like a part of recovery, is like learning how to handle difficult emotions and to handle going through difficult situations without having to like fall back on past patterns. And so for me, what it's come to is just kind of trusting like the universe, whatever, and just kind of trusting that things are going to work out fine. Because I can get into a place where I'm just completely useless to everybody because I'm wrapped up in my own problems. So that's been a big pattern.
I think that's pretty, I like what you said about handling difficult emotions, because we tend to
Mm-hmm.
shy away from them, whatever it is, right? And we turn to find something to numb those things, right?
Yep.
So, thanks for sharing all that and going kind of deep on those topics. Um, but let's talk about Sassy Women in Sales. What is it? Let people know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a free networking group. We put on events for women who are in SaaS sales. It's taking off. We're starting to branch out. We've spoke at a university. We spoke at UT to one of my old sales professors. But our goal is to be able to provide support and resources to women who are in SaaS sales. But we also have a big goal of being able to get more women into this field and to provide resources there.
So what kind of research, like talk about it though, like what kind of, when you have an event, what's an event? And granted, I remember this started either right before or right after COVID, and there was like, oh, we can go do all these things, right? And then all of a sudden, bam.
It did. That's exactly what happened. We had our first event in February, and it was an in-person event. We had a great turnout. And then the next month and the month after, we had to cancel our events. And eventually, whenever July came around, we decided to go virtual. So yeah, resources, a lot of it is just community right now. We're working on branching out. We were wanting to do more panels at a university setting to be able to take women who are in sales in and be like, hey, like this is what we did for UT. We came in and we're like, here's some examples, here's what it looks like, here's some connections to people who are not yet in the field, to hopefully inspire them to, and to make sure they kind of can. I mean, for me, like it's been just being visual, being able to be like, we are in this field, it's not all men, and being able to inspire more.
So is it like a LinkedIn group? Is it a Slack group? What is it? How are you managing the community? What's the platform?
Yeah, we do Zoom events. So we do virtual events once a month, maybe twice a month, and we do everything from like specific networking events. Next month we are putting on a Black female panel event to talk about like being Black and being a woman and being in sales. But we've also done everything from happy hours. A lot of our vision has been to make it really approachable and to make it where you can come in and you can kind of get like a smaller happy hour feel through a virtual event. So we've been utilizing the breakout room. I've actually been able to grow my network a lot through this too, which has been pretty cool, because we do the breakout rooms and you can actually talk to people in a smaller group setting instead of being talked at for an hour.
Richard, you're muted.
Standard. What are the topics that you're bringing? Because I do want, particularly, one, I want women to know that these are the kinds of conversations, and two, I want men to know that these are the kinds of conversations, right? So that they can educate themselves.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is providing community. I mean, definitely, like if someone's going through something, like, we all, like all the women in the industry, we all have our stories of horror stories of like, this guy said this, and I definitely want to, be there to like have those conversations and to help women get out of that. Because honestly, for me, like whenever I had that February 0 month, like what kind of sparked that was like, I ran into like a super sexist situation at work. And so definitely, like we're having conversations around like equality and everything, but also it's been like the happy hours have been pretty chill and just kind of taking some time to like meet some other women at other companies and to grow your network. And that's not always done just with talking about work. It's talking about a little bit of everything. I know we had a lot of conversations about, like, one girl said she liked mariachi music, and then we're talking about music. And, you know, we have a lot of these conversations, and also just how to grow your career. You know, I'm always talking about, like, posting more on LinkedIn. You know, I attended y'all's, you know, workshop last November, and, you know, that changed my, like, how I did my LinkedIn. And so I'm always trying to encourage, you know, women, steps they can take for their careers. We have a lot of those conversations as well. And then, of course, diversity. And, you know, diversity for us doesn't just mean, you know, women. You know, we definitely want to be intersectional in how we talk about diversity, and also talk about race and gender identity and sexuality.
Yeah. So how do you, without naming names, what do you encourage a woman to do when they do run into that sexist situation at work? Do they speak up? Do they not speak up? And I know it's very situational, right? But I'm trying to give some feedback for the listeners who are like, oh my God, I've experienced that, or wow, I wonder if I could have said that, or whatever other ideas you guys are coming up with. So.
Yeah, I think it's super important to speak up. And I did speak up, and it was something that I spoke up because I found out that this was a thing. You know, the person who said this was not my manager. We didn't even work in the same office. And, you know, I found out that it was a pattern, and that a lot of people had quit because of this, but I was the first one to say anything. So, like, nothing came from it. And so I always encourage women, like, to, like, whenever it happens at work, you know, I think the best thing to do is to, you know, speak up to management and to HR, and to see if they can do anything about it. And something I'm working on with myself is speaking up in the moment, because I'm terrible at this. You know, it usually takes a while for things to sink in for me before I realize, like, oh, that was not okay, or, like, to realize that, like, oh, I should have said something, you know, because I ran into a situation, you know, a few weeks ago where I was talking to a guy who's a thought leader in our field who doesn't work at my company, like, nothing like that. And he said that I sound confident and don't stutter like most women do. And, you know, I just brushed it off in the moment and, like, moved on. And then I realized later, like, oh, wow, that was not okay. You know, so what I'm working on, and what really good advice was given to me, was to kind of ask people to repeat themselves, or, like, what do you mean by that? Because then they have to then defend their, like, super sexist thing that they just said. So that was, like, a really good bit of practical advice that I got recently, was to have them repeat themselves or explain it, because it's just not going to sound good whenever they have to do that.
Not that it's an excuse, but do you think some of that is also conditioned into the male psyche too? Right. And it doesn't,
Yeah,
it's okay. Like, I don't want to, say
for
that that's
sure.
okay. Like, do you think he was coming from a negative point of view, or was he, like, I'm enjoying this conversation and it's nice to talk to someone who knows how to talk?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I don't always, because I don't know enough about this guy to be able to be like, oh yeah, he's, like, a sexist piece of shit, you know? It may have just been that has been his experience, and so he was trying to pay me a compliment. You know, I definitely acknowledge that, you know, a lot of the times it's not the case that they're just, like, a terrible person. It's just that they have had experiences that, you know, they think that that's an all right thing to say, and no one's ever told them otherwise. So I definitely think there can be two sides of the coin there. You know, it's obviously not a great thing to say, but it does maybe see, like, it can kind of seem like, okay, if you have that attitude that, like, most women stutter, or they don't know how to talk confidently, then how is that affecting your hiring process and stuff?
Right. And that's what I'm getting. That's where I was sort of wondering, is that this is what it means to have an intentional bias, right? And I know I've done it. I know I've said something like that. And I'm learning, and it's awkward. I can't remember who we had on, Scott, but she was saying, look, there's a lot of these little awkward moments where, women should speak up, and men need to be, ready to handle it, right? And I think it's good. I'm glad you're recognizing it, and hope you're coaching folks to speak out in a healthy way. So
how are, how are you balancing life as a founder and a BDR? How do you prioritize, very tactically, not, like, psychologically, tactically, like, how do you split your time?
I mean, during the day, I'm a BDR, and during lunchtime, like that's typically whenever, because I've learned that if I reach out or post things in the evening, people don't see it. So it just has to be done during the day. So honestly, it's usually over lunch, over breaks,
So
because it's
you're fully just like squeezing your side hustle, if you will, into pockets of your regular day.
lunch, weekends, evenings. Courtney and I meet every Monday at 5, to speak about all this. But yeah, it's a lot.
Now, you have not been at your current role more than 4 or 5 months now. So you were like a COVID layoff and a COVID onboard. What was that experience like for you?
So I actually wasn't laid off. I just kind of ended up switching companies. This opportunity fell into my lap, and I was like, that sounds great. So, but it was very different I did go into the office on the first day with my direct manager, and they gave me the laptop. They kind of gave me a tour of like the empty office. So I had one day working in the office, and everything else has been completely remote, which, we sell like a pretty challenging software, really complicated, have a very complicated sale. And so it's been a lot, but I mean, kind of what I've been doing is to try to meet everyone, because I meet everyone on my team. I spend time with my team on Zoom and everything, but I've been doing like weekly coffee meetings with like a random person from outside of my team. So trying to meet people.
And then you went from a full cycle an AE role to a BDR role. That's sort of the opposite direction a lot of people go. So talk to us about that transition. What is that like?
It was very different. I was SMB too, so I'm new to enterprise. But definitely, it's so nice to not have that monthly quota. I will say that. But it's been a lot more focusing on relationships with other companies. A lot more like focusing on using LinkedIn for sales, because that was something that I've used LinkedIn ever since I saw y'all's talk like last year, but it was mostly for my own purposes, and it was very different to like switch gears and be like, okay, like how do I reach out to prospects and build that connection without being annoying, because I know this is something you and I've talked about. It's just how annoying outreach can be.
Yeah, so it's moving from using it in personal branding, like content creation, to actually using it as a sales tool.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to dig in. I want to ask that question about making that shift, but what made you want to go from an AE to a BDR?
It was the opportunity. It was a good opportunity. What was that?
Sorry, I went like that because she went from SMB to enterprise. That was me guessing that it was an enterprise.
Yeah, it was exactly that. I hadn't been looking, but my boss reached out to me, wondering if I knew of anyone or any women in particular who were looking for a new role, and I was like, actually, because he sent the salary along with it, and I was like, actually, that's more than what I'm making, so we can talk.
Comes down to money. Let's talk about that other piece, right? Because we so often, there are two pieces to LinkedIn. There is the sell, and don't send the, invite pitch. And then there's the, hey, I want to build my brand. And sometimes I think people do struggle with how and when to do that. And so I'd love to hear your experience on that, because I think it's a really important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I try to post like 1 or 2 times a week, and it's usually, something professionally related, sometimes sales related. I'm not really to the point to where I'm talking in any specifics about pricing, which is, what we sell. We sell pricing optimization software. So how I do a lot of my outreach is, interacting on the posts of people who are, my prospects. Sending the messages. I still use the whole I'm new to the industry thing, and that's actually been a really great in, because a lot of the challenge that I've had is that I'm selling into an industry, the pricing industry and manufacturing distribution, that I don't have any experience in, at all. And I'm selling to these people who have 30 years of experience in pricing. And so, I'm used to kind of being in a position where at past companies, I smarter than them in some things, and I can be like, I have, this new perspective on this new thing that I can offer you. And I've learned that I just can't go in the same way that I'm used to. I'm having to be more strategic and to come in and to not come in and be like, I know more than you, but to come in and be like, hey, I have like interesting things to offer. I have interesting perspective, interesting product that might be interesting. And to come in and be like, hey, I'm new to the industry. I'd love to talk to you and have like a non-sales conversation just to learn about how your, pricing team operates. That's one that I ended up having that conversation last week with this guy who just laid it all out for me. And it was so interesting I feel like I kind of got trained on how to talk to other people, because that's kind of what I asked him. I was like, how should I be approaching these other pricing directors? And he gave me some just priceless advice on how I should be approaching this and what he as a pricing director actually cared about. That was like very interesting to me. So I definitely encourage people to have those conversations and to build your network and to talk to people in the field, and in non-sales conversations too, just to learn.
I'm learning not to speak till I come off mute, Scott.
So proud of
I'm dominating, Scott. You need to jump in here. Are there things that this person gave you in terms of advice about how to talk to someone that you could genericize for other people to go, oh, I should ask the question that way, not pricing, right? Like I'm trying to give people tactical advice.
Sure. So, yeah, I guess there is a way to do it, because one of the biggest things of advice I got is that I need to be figuring out where in the transformation process that these companies are in, because he gave me like, I guess there's like a 5 different level process that like is a model that a lot of these guys work off of whenever they're trying to transform, their company. And figuring out like where they're at in that process will be able to tell me like where they're at and being able to purchase something like what we sell. Yeah. And that was something that just like I had never really thought about, that to ask them like where they're at in their own process of building up their pricing team.
What are some of the learnings that you have from selling on LinkedIn specifically? Like what's working to get somebody's attention right now, and maybe what has failed miserably that you could have a laugh at and share with us?
For a while, someone did this to me and I thought it would be a great idea to try it. So someone reached out to me and they were like, hey, I'm just trying to get to know people on my LinkedIn. Here's an interesting fact about me. I would love to hear one about you too. And like me, like I'm quirky. I got like interesting facts for like days. I had my first hamburger whenever I was 23 years old. And like people are always like, are your parents vegan? I'm like, no. My parents are actually beef farmers. It's this whole thing, and so I started like sending, connecting with people and sending that message and being like, hey, like, here's this interesting fact about me. I'd love to hear one about you. And that was like hit or miss, but that was something I did try. Worked really well with, people who were lower on the totem pole. But I definitely like cringe a little bit to think that I sent that message to people who were like VPs at these like enterprise companies. But I did get to, because then I could like get to know people. And, it's funny that we're talking about this, because actually this morning I was reconnecting with one of the guys that I had talked to, because then we'd go back and forth and I'd be like, hey, would you be willing to have a phone conversation about your business? I was actually looking to speak to someone there. And, people at this point think I'm like fun and entertaining, I guess, because they agreed to it. So that was one of the things that was like a hit or a miss. I actually did tell that to my friend recently who used it in a way that did work. So I think there are like applications for that. But what has been working for me is just, leveraging that I'm new to the industry and wanting to make connections and have conversations.
I like this idea of the interesting factoid, Richard. Have you ever heard of that before?
No, but I'm sitting here going, okay, I want to know, now I want to know, 4 more from JoBeth, and I want to hear what Scott's interesting factoids are to see if I actually know them, or maybe I could guess Scott's factoid and Scott could guess mine. So.
I got some funny ones, like, because I started using it on people in our field who I would connect with, and I found out one guy had, and he's like a sales leader at some company in Austin, and he had driven through a McDonald's on accident one time, like through like the actual building
Like
with
drove
his
through
car.
the store. Like
Yeah, like going through.
Not like the drive.
the building, not going through the drive-through. He drove straight through the building because he thought it was in reverse and it was in drive, and he like floored it, you know. So I got to hear like a lot of, because it made it a lot easier to have conversations with people whenever you figure out this weird thing about themselves, you know. Like the guy I was talking to this morning has like a 15th century map tattooed on his entire back, and whenever he gets drunk and goes to the pool, people are always like, this is where I'm from. So yeah, so it's a very interesting way to get to know people. I definitely think it could be used, but I don't recommend sending it.
We're actually using this tactic, Richard, on Thursday night sales.
Oh, are you?
We have these little quizzes, this little like text message quiz that goes out. Okay. And it has like little fact about Amy or a little fact about me, and like multiple choice, like which one of these did Scott not do? One of them was like
2 truths and a lie.
Yes, it's sort of like that. So you want to play the game, Richard? So it was like Scott has run with the Bulls in Pamplona, Spain, failed his driver exam the first time, and I don't remember what the other one was, but which one, Richard? Have I run with the Bulls, or did I fail my driver's test the first time?
Oh, those are both pretty believable based on a couple things I know about you. This is a good one. I don't know. Let me think.
It's too late. You lose.
I actually think you ran with the Bulls.
I did run with the Bulls.
Yeah, I knew you played soccer in Europe, and I'm like, he had to have done that while he was over there.
I also failed my driver's test the first time.
Oh, so you did.
I did too. So.
Oh, there was another one that like wasn't true, but right. This is an application of JoBeth's LinkedIn strategy here.
Well, and how my friend used it was that she was trying to reach out to, some IT professionals in Austin who were a little bit younger. And so she knew that like most IT people are nerds or whatever. And so she used a fact that was like about how like she started playing video games when she was young, or something like that. But it was something that like was interesting to them, to where it did spark a conversation with a few people.
That's cool. We've got to start wrapping up the show here, but we try to end with an offer and try to say, how can we be helpful to you? Is there anything that we can do to help you, or any questions that we can answer for you? So that's where we kind of want to wrap up.
Sure. Yeah, we have a couple of Sassy Women in Sales events coming up. We actually have one this Wednesday. I don't know when y'all post these, but it'll be Wednesday. When do y'all post them, by the way?
It'll come out Monday.
Okay, well, never mind then. The next, go ahead.
Where can they go to sign up for them? Where can they go to connect?
We have a beautiful website that I have made. It's sassywomen.com. So Sassy with, SAASSY women.com. And we have an exciting event coming up that will be announced by the time everyone hears this. It's going to be November 18th, and that's going to be our Black and Female Sales Success Stories event. Would love it to have more people attend, as well as future events that we have, and they can stay up to date with that by connecting with me or through just following our pages and our website.
Cool.
Well, I think you're building something really neat there and filling a void in the market, and wish you all the best success with that, as well as at your current BDR role. So thanks for spending some time with us, and hopefully I see you again sometime soon on Thursday night.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, JoBeth. Talk to you soon.